We're opening this new facility here in Doncaster. The results from collaboration between Network Rail, between ourselves, Freightliner, between Doncaster City Council, and this really brings together the ability to improve the way that we train our drivers, principally to do with the ERTMS. But actually everything will raise its bar on the back of this. New drivers that we recruit into Freightliner will be trained here, and they'll have their first experiences of both rules but also the next trying it out on the simulators. So it raises the bar, it improves our level of professionalism, and it gets us ready for the introduction of ERTMS on the East Coast Main Line, which I'm really looking forward to. 350 drivers have been through the academy here, and I think one expressed some concern about the extent of the technical change, but I think everyone else is up for it, and we see that, don't we? I think that's why it's so important to use things like simulation, because to try and explain something like the railway full stop, but particularly something that's quite technical in its approach, like ETCS, to explain it on flip charts and overheads, and when I was doing my crew training, sort of like acetates and what have you, it doesn't. It's very theoretical, isn't it? Whereas the great thing here is you can describe this process and how the system works, and then you can put drivers on a simulator. There's 4 of them next door, and straight away they're going to be at home because that's their work environment, and they're presented with things they've seen every day but in a slightly modified format. And certainly when I've talked to drivers that have moved from line side to in-cab, whether it was at Eurostar with TVM or with just talking to drivers on the Cambrian line a few years ago, actually no one struggles with it, and people very quickly adopt it. It absolutely moves. Most of our locomotives are fairly traditional in their in their design and what they do. Of course, this brings a whole new level of technology to the locomotive, albeit a lot of the engineering training is being established at the key depots in Leeds, Ipswich and Crewe, and they've got new porter cabins have gone in there, and the training rig is basically the electronics cubicle of a 66 post implementation of ETCS. So in that scenario, just like the drivers here can play and experience it firsthand, we'll do the same thing for the engineers. And that's absolutely in keeping with what we want to do anyway, because we want to make use of remote conditioning monitoring systems, for example, on locomotives, so that we can tell that they're suffering before they fail. So, and of course, bringing all that together, that really is a big opportunity, I think, for freight and for the whole rail industry. Right now, what we can do is make sure that freight trains spend less time stopped in sidings, and that they get a clean run, and they don't have to decelerate and stop, and then accelerate again. Let's start off from the fact that if a freight train's sitting in a loop and sitting there with the engine idling and the cost of the loco and the wagons and the driver, it's completely uneconomic. It's not doing anything, it's not working. We don't do that with road lorries, do we? And sort of say, well, you just pull off the road during the rush hour and let the cars past. I mean, the lorry sits there, drives along the road and with everything else. So I think that's the wrong approach to think about. I absolutely believe that there is more capacity to be had on the existing network, and that we can develop the network sensibly. Some of this is about simple stuff, isn't it? Whether it's the turnout speeds off the main line into a siding, where if you've got a 10 or 15 mile an hour turnout speed, or indeed a speed just beyond the turnout might be 25, but if there's a 5 miles an hour siding just beyond it, the train will be going in at 5 miles an hour. If the train's 775 metres long, that takes a long time. So actually making some pretty, improving the speed in sidings, for example, or off-network elements, if that reduces the time it takes to get the train into the terminal, great. That increases capacity on the network, doesn't it? So I think there's lots of really simple stuff like that. Now, the challenge at the moment is who pays for that. It's not obviously Network Rail's role to enhance the network. That's paid for through government, and then Network Rail delivers it. Network Rail's not funded to deliver enhancements. But actually, the amount of sums that we'd be talking about to improve turnouts, to improve the speeding, deciding so that trains can get off the network quicker, is tiny stuff in railway sense. So I think there's a lot of enablement that can be done like that. But further forward, ETCS is a good investment for that. think about West Coast North, which I'm obviously very familiar, the potential to move to ETCS means that we'd have bidirectional working. There is no bidirectional working between Warrington and Scotland at the moment. Last week, when a Voyager failed, it was necessary to have a pilot, with the pilot armband escorting each train through the section in 2023. With ETCS, actually, of course, every railway can become bidirectional. So we had trains 4 or 5 hours late as a result of that failed train last week. In a ETCS world, I think would have had trains an hour or two late. It's an entirely different concept, because we've got to be able to deliver to the customer. That's the thing. Most of our customers don't expect trains to arrive in 5 minutes. They do want it to turn up, and what they can't cope with is the trains at Crewe, because we've got pilot working in Oxenholme. That doesn't work for them. So we've got to find a way of keeping trains moving. So there's things we could do today and are doing today. So, for example, the great work with Network Rail to recast the Mendip Rail timetable that predominantly runs on the Western. That's the first time that timetable has been changed since the Class 59s were introduced in 1985. Okay, so that changes in December, and that will keep those trains moving. So that improves environmental credentials straight away and will reduce energy cost and improves performance as well, actually, for passenger trains. So there's a good win there. But we've got to roll that principle out much further. And we spend too long with trains sitting in locations waiting for paths. And of course, all the time they're sitting there, in effect, the theoretical lorry is overtaking. And one of the big things that I've been most surprised about in the role is just how keen pricing is, and pricing is led by the lorry industry. There's absolutely no doubt that my pricing between Felixstowe and Manchester, or Felixstowe and Leeds, Southampton and whatever, is fundamentally driven by how much it costs to stick a box on a lorry. And the road industry has been very good at embracing technology. The technology that's on in a lorry now, and indeed on the trailer, just the trailer, is far greater than we have the technology on a freight wagon, and yet it's doing the same job. It's got cameras, it's got sensing systems on it. A freight wagon is just dumb. So we've really got to embrace technology. There's a whole load of challenges that makes that difficult for freight. There's no train supply system down the train, for example. So too much of it does feel very historic. Now, the challenge there is to do that in an affordable way. That means that actually it helps us reduce our operating costs so that we can win competitively on price, not just having to win on the basis of everyone knows rail's the right thing to do. That's good, but being more expensive is a bad place for the industry to be. And that's where ETCS or ERTMS, I think has a real opportunity. We must make sure that implementing ERTMS, it doesn't add more cost, but actually what it does is liberate some of the opportunities, just like I've talked about, technology, and provide an opportunity then to mean that, for example, drivers can have much greater route knowledge. Because obviously if you're driving any TCS systems, actually the level of route knowledge is very different from if you're driving on the line-side signalling system. As we see in France, there's a fundamental principle of how trains operated over there. So, so I think that's a big opportunity, because then we'll have more resilience, and it'll be cheaper to have some of the resilience. So if it gets windy tonight on the West Coast Main Line, we could divert the trains that are supposed to run on West Coast via East Coast. But obviously all the time that requires a different driver with different skill sets and possibly from different locomotives, that makes that resilience too expensive. Once you could do it all together, yeah, great, West Coast is shut because it's windy, okay, we'll run on East Coast tonight. So I really don't believe that it's as simple as just building more loops to improve freight capacity. There might be one or two particular examples, but that's not generally what's necessary. As I've said, we want freight trains not in loops. We want to keep freight trains moving along the network. So that's about how the timetable works to balance off the freight train moving along steadily behind the passenger train that might be making the passenger calls, for example. But no, putting trains in sidings and loops is the last thing that we want to do. So last mile stands out, doesn't it? And there's obvious things like the last literally mile into Thames Gateway, which if that was electrified, obviously would make a difference. Or support the industry so that we can invest in some battery technology for the trains we've currently got. We could put some batteries on the Class 90, couldn't we? And it could take itself those last few miles. That's all very practical and doable. At the moment, my customers and the ultimate customer are not prepared to pay extra for green benefits. They want green benefits. We all want green benefits, but actually, because it's such a competitive market, no one's willing to pay extra. So if I say, look, I can give you a diesel train for this price and an electric train for this price, actually the diesel price will win. And of course, a diesel train is still vastly better than a road lorry. So it's still better for the environment. But of course, the more we can do in electric, the better it is. So I think that there's great scope, and I think it's the type of thing I'd imagine that GBR would be doing if it existed now, would be helping those sort of cross-industry investments where you might say, look, let's not electrify that stretch, but let's invest in supporting operators to put battery technology into trains. Or, absolutely, let's make sure that last little investment does get made, because we know that unlocks a whole series of benefits around the country. But that needs a coordinated strategic vision, doesn't it? And I can do, we're a privately owned company, we have private investment, I've got shareholders who are keen to invest in transport and logistics, but I need the environment in which they can do that. And that needs clarity, and it needs a contractual arrangement to make that so there's a good chance we can take risk but earn some money back. And that's not where the UK Rail is at the moment. But also there's 93s and there's 99s onto the market, so we're going to look at all of those things. One of the things I've really enjoyed is that wider European responsibility, and a Freightliner Poland, which operates essentially in Poland and Germany, is doing extremely well. They've outperformed their budget this year, and in fact we're going to support them with some more resources, because actually they're growing so fast that actually getting more kit is the biggest challenge they've got. So we're really keen to do that, and amazing team in a very competitive environment. I mean, the Polish freight scene is even more deregulated than in the UK. It's about 40 operators over there, which is quite incredible, and some of them literally running one train. So there's a very different market there, but we're the fourth biggest operator in Poland, and that's something that we're keen to pursue and develop. And then the Netherlands, also operating in the Netherlands and into Germany as well, via different routes, that company's been through a lot of challenges the last couple of years. The economy is very different in the Netherlands, and Rotterdam Port is in a different cycle than we're seeing in Poland. So, but the principles of freight are common. I do see quite a supportive environment in Europe, and there's no doubt that the ability to move assets around quite easily is part of that value. So we think we gain a lot from our European businesses. We can learn from them. We're already using ETCS over there, for example, and I know that they both the MDs of those two businesses were over here last week, learning from my team. So there's a lot of opportunity there.